Let's bring in Patricia Forsythe, a former Australian High Commissioner to New Zealand. Patricia Forsythe, thanks so much for your time. What was your first reaction to this news this morning?
Well, I was surprised. I didn't get up this morning thinking Jacinda's going to make an announcement today. But I'm not surprised that she has made the announcement. It was coming. The polls for the last year have been going backwards for the Labor government and forwards for the National opposition. And her position as preferred Prime Minister has also slipped considerably. So even though she's quite popular when you talk to New Zealanders, the bigger picture around the government is one where it's going to be a hard year and a very hard election for them. So, no, I'm not surprised.
Almost cutting and running, in a sense.
But it's a bit of, look, New Zealand has a bit of a habit. They don't wait to be chopped. They do it more gently than Australia. Think of John Key. John Key went out in his prime as Prime Minister, gave Bill English time to be there as Prime Minister, but then Bill lost the election. They seem to do it in a way that's a little more gentle than we do in Australia.
You can say that again. But what a poisoned chalice, I guess. I mean, we've seen this in Australian domestic politics. You've got hardly any time to establish yourself. I wonder then if this, and I confess I don't know much about it, but whether Chris Hipkins isn't one of the leading chance because at least he's got that profile from COVID. Who do you think the contenders will be? Well,
I'm surprised Grant Robertson has said no, because he's a very good media performer. He has been good in finance and Deputy Prime Minister, and he loves his sport. So he gets out amongst the New Zealanders and talks to them on their things they're interested in. Chris Hipkins also stepped up as Health Minister partway through the COVID period and was very good and is a very good media performer. The other one would be Dr. Megan Woods. She is out of Auckland, and of course that's where the votes are. She's also sitting with Chris Hipkins, I think 4 and 5 in the cabinet. She's got energy, but she's also got the poison chalice of housing, and housing is one of their issues where the government has not been performing well. Huge issues around social housing. You know, it makes where we're at in Australia on some of this pale because as a country of 5 million people, they have so much more to do with less resources. Anyway, Megan Woods may well be one. She's from the left, from the union background, as is Chris Hipkins. They would be the two that I'd see now. If they can't drag Grant Robertson to the fore, then it would be one or other, I think.
And as High Commissioner, you would have dealt a fair bit with Jacinda Ardern. Got any good anecdotes for us? What was she like? Well,
I had a lot to do with her, but, you know, and some of them were in the times after the Christchurch terrorist attack in the wake of Whakaari White Island. So we often saw each other at the tough times. And she is everything people have said. She's personable. She's empathetic. And she's a very good communicator. She's very easy to talk to. That doesn't always make you the best leader or for the best government. And this is a government now that has a lot of difficult issues to resolve. And they, you know, for example, this skill shortage means that they're not delivering on infrastructure. They made promises they can't see through.
Right.
They're the issues that she's facing, or they're facing.
I must admit, I recently holidayed in New Zealand. I don't think there was a business where there wasn't a sign up saying we need workers. It's worse than here, isn't it?
Much worse. Their standard of their cost of living is at least as high as ours, if not higher. Their wages are lower. So, of course, we're a great magnet to attract people, and that is more part of the problem. We have same standards, so you can train in New Zealand, you can work in Australia, and that magnet is pulling people all the time.
If Christopher Luxon is elected later in the year, how do you think that will change the country?
Well, he's only been in Parliament for 2 years, but he was Chief Executive Officer of Air New Zealand. He was seen as a good business operator. You know, he was a good communicator. He took Air New Zealand forward on, say, recognition of Maori within the company. So he's got a big picture focus. But he's possibly untested really in the political world, even though he's now been there for 2 years and has been leader for a while. He will depend on some of the hard-nosed, longer-term members of Parliament, I think, in those early days. But, you know, his business credentials are a good stead for where I think he will take New Zealand.
And so, generally speaking, I mean, you're a former Liberal MP. It is a left-leaning country, isn't it? So, it really would be a change. I know national governments have had periods in there, but probably the logical party of federal government there, like it's been the coalition here for many years, is Labor, isn't it?
Well, that's where the balance would go Labor more often than Nationals. And maybe in National case, you come in after some of the difficult times and you clean up and they move on. They are certainly somewhat more left, although the smaller party that could well be governing in a government with the Nationals is the ACT Party, which is sort of a libertarian. It's often described as right-wing. I saw it more libertarian. And it has been growing, so I think its numbers are up around the 10%, sitting up there with the Greens. Now, that would say that's not the focus of a country that's heading left. He's more to the right, but a very good operator within the Parliament.
And just finally, how do you think the zero COVID policy has ended up playing out for Jacinda Ardern?
I think, like most governments around the world, where you took the tough decisions and they might have seen right at the time, in hindsight, people look back. And they certainly, I think that they regret the fact that the schools were locked down for a long time, that many businesses couldn't function. And so they'll probably take it out with the baseball bat to the government.
But the funny thing about that is here, the state premiers who did it keep getting re-elected, although you could argue there's a similarity with the Morrison government on that.
They were very tough. It was a very strong COVID policy approach. But it was a small country that needed to protect their health industry and their department.
Didn't have the ICU beds we had, right?
Yeah, they had to take the tough call.
Patricia Forsythe, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.